Henry Parker, a 74-year-old Vietnam War veteran, was just trying to pick up his medication when a ruthless biker attacked him over a spilled coffee. But what happened next will leave you speechless. Stick around till the end to see how an unexpected hero steps in and turns the tables. And don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. On a crisp autumn morning, Henry maneuvered his wheelchair down the uneven sidewalk toward the local gas station. The cool air carried the scent of fallen leaves, a quiet reminder that colder days were on the way. Living with ALS, a degenerative nerve disease, made every movement a challenge, but Henry refused to let it define him. Each push of his wheelchair was slow, deliberate, a testament to his unwavering spirit. Dressed in a thick leather jacket and trousers, he focused on the familiar half-mile route. The gas station wasn't just a place to pick up his medication, it was a small piece of normalcy in a world that had taken so much from him. As he reached the entrance, the heavy swing door loomed like a test of patience. With effort, he managed to push it open just enough to wheel himself inside. The warm air of the store replaced the morning chill, and behind the counter, Tom, the young cashier, greeted him with a friendly nod. "Morning, Mr. Parker," Tom said. Henry nodded back, appreciating the simple kindness. These small interactions mattered more than people realized. Slowly, he made his way to the pharmaceutical section, his sharp eyes scanning the shelves until he found what he needed, a tube of anti-inflammatory ointment to help with his muscle stiffness. With a shaking hand, he grabbed it and placed it in his lap. Even something as small as this felt like a victory. At the counter, Tom rang up the purchase, the beep of the scanner breaking the quiet morning. Henry patted his pockets, his brow furrowing as realization hit, he'd forgotten his wallet. "Ah, lucky me. Age and memory," he chuckled, fishing out the last of his loose change. Miraculously, he scraped together exactly $5, just enough to cover the cost. "Don't forget your veteran discount, Mr. Parker," Tom reminded him with a grin, knocking the price down to $4. That extra dollar gave Henry an idea. His eyes drifted to the coffee machine in the corner of the store. A cup of coffee, something simple, something warm. A small indulgence for the chilly journey home. Tom poured the coffee while Henry made light conversation, his natural warmth shining through despite the cashier's distracted responses. "It's the little things, you know," Henry mused, holding the cup in his trembling hands. "Having this store nearby makes life a bit easier, even with my ALS." Tom nodded absent-mindedly, already returning to his duties, leaving Henry to sip his coffee in quiet contentment. With his drink in hand, Henry carefully balanced the cup on his lap and maneuvered toward the exit. The swing door was just as stubborn on the way out, and as he focused on keeping the coffee steady, he didn't notice the man approaching until it was too late. The impact was sudden. The coffee spilled across Henry's lap and onto the tiled floor. The other man, a broad-shouldered biker in a leather vest, growled in frustration. "What the hell is wrong with you?" the man snapped, his face twisting with anger. "Can't you watch where you're going?" Startled and embarrassed, Henry immediately began to apologize. "I'm so sorry. It was an accident," he said, his voice steady despite the hot liquid seeping into his trousers. He reached for his handkerchief, trying to blot the sting away. The biker, however, wasn't interested in apologies. "An accident?" he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Your accident just cost me my coffee. You're gonna pay for that, old man." Henry's brow furrowed as he tried to explain. "I don't have any more money on me. I spent my last dollar on this coffee," he said, his voice calm but edged with quiet desperation. But the biker wasn't listening. With a sudden shove, he grabbed the handles of Henry's wheelchair and pushed him roughly toward the exit, away from the view of other customers. Henry protested, but the biker's brute strength overpowered him. The morning air bit at Henry's skin as they emerged outside, and the biker's tone darkened. "Listen here, Grandpa," he growled, leaning over Henry menacingly. "I want my $3.50 for that coffee. Now." Henry, his hands trembling, tried once more to explain. "I'm telling you the truth, I forgot my wallet at home." The biker sneered. You expect me to believe that? His hand shot out, yanking at Henry's jacket, aggressively searching for a wallet that wasn't there. Henry squirmed, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "Stop, please. I'm a veteran. I served this country. Show some respect." But the biker's expression didn't soften. Instead, his grip tightened as he searched Henry's pockets, his fingers rough and unforgiving. The humiliation and pain blended into something sharp, something unbearable. And then, a commanding voice sliced through the tension. "Hey! What's going on here?" The biker froze, his grip loosening. And in that moment, everything changed. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, a deep, commanding voice cut through the tension. "Hey! What's going on here?" Henry and the biker both turned toward the entrance of the store. Standing there, his towering frame filling the doorway, was none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. His sharp gaze locked onto the scene, instantly shifting the power dynamic. Dwayne strode forward, his steps deliberate, his expression unreadable. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. He glanced between Henry and the biker, his eyes narrowing as he took in the situation. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're harassing this man." The biker, who had moments ago been full of bravado, suddenly looked a little less sure of himself. He squared his shoulders, trying to maintain his tough exterior. "This doesn't concern you," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Dwayne tilted his head slightly, his stare unwavering. "See, when I see someone assaulting an elderly veteran, it becomes my concern." His tone was even, but the unspoken warning in his words was crystal clear. Henry, still trembling but relieved, mustered a faint smile. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible. For a moment, the air was thick with tension. The biker, Rick, took a step back, but his fists remained clenched. He cast a venomous glare at Henry before turning on his heel and stomping toward his parked motorcycle. It should have been over. But it wasn't. Rick pulled out his phone, his lips curling into a smug smirk as he dialed a number. His voice was low but laced with menace. "Bear, it's me. I need backup. Get the boys and meet me at the dirt path near Main Street. We've got a situation." Snapping his phone shut, he turned back to face Henry and Dwayne, his smirk widening. "This isn't over, old man." Then, pointing a finger at Dwayne, he added, "And you? Better watch yourself." With that, he mounted his bike and roared off down the road. Dwayne crouched next to Henry's wheelchair, his expression softening. "Are you okay, sir?" His voice, once sharp with authority, was now filled with concern. Henry nodded weakly, though his trembling hands betrayed the lingering fear. "I'll be fine," he murmured. "Thank you for stepping in." That man, he wouldn't listen. Dwayne's jaw tightened as he glanced down the street. "I don't think he's done," he said grimly. "We need to get you somewhere safe." Henry hesitated. His pride refused to let him appear vulnerable, even in the face of clear danger. "I'll manage," he insisted, attempting to straighten his jacket with shaking fingers. "I've faced worse in my time." Dwayne wasn't convinced. "You shouldn't have to face this alone," he said firmly. "Do you have anyone nearby you can call? Family? A neighbor?" Henry shook his head. "It's just me now. My wife, she passed some years ago." His voice wavered for a moment before he quickly composed himself. "I live a few blocks away." Dwayne frowned but nodded, respecting the older man's independence. "All right, Mr. Parker. I'll walk with you part of the way, just to make sure you're okay." Henry gave a small nod, appreciating the silent support. Together, they began moving down the sidewalk, the rhythmic creak of Henry's wheelchair filling the quiet space between them. But then, the rumble of engines shattered the silence. The sound grew louder, more menacing, echoing off the buildings around them. Dwayne stopped, his expression darkening. "Stay close to me," he instructed, stepping protectively in front of Henry. Moments later, a gang of motorcycles emerged from the distance, their headlights cutting through the dimming afternoon light. The riders slowed as they approached, surrounding the pair like a pack of wolves. At the center of the formation was a massive man with a grizzled beard and an air of authority. He dismounted his bike, pulling off his helmet to reveal a weathered face, etched with years of experience. "I'm Bear," he announced, his deep voice commanding attention. His sharp eyes settled on Dwayne. "And you must be the movie star stirring up trouble." Dwayne crossed his arms, his stance unwavering. "That's right," he said evenly. Then, with a nod toward Henry, he added, "And this man? He's a Vietnam veteran who was just harassed and threatened by one of your guys." Bear's gaze shifted to Henry. His expression was unreadable. "Rick called us," he said slowly, his tone measured. "Said there was trouble." Dwayne didn't flinch. "Rick lied," he stated bluntly. "He tried to extort money from Mr. Parker over a spilled coffee, then threatened him when he couldn't pay. That's the real trouble." The bikers exchanged glances, murmurs rippling through the group. Bear raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. He turned toward Rick, who stood at the edge of the crowd, his arms crossed but his confidence visibly shaken. "Rick," Bear said, his tone low and dangerous, "is this true?" Rick hesitated. His bravado cracked under Bear's piercing gaze. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he stammered. "The old man spilled coffee on me. I just wanted him to pay for it." Bear's eyes hardened. "And you thought the best way to handle that was to drag a veteran out of his wheelchair and call us for backup?" His voice was quiet, but the weight of his words was crushing. Rick's jaw tensed. "Come on, Bear, it's not a big deal. No one got hurt." Bear took a slow step toward him, towering over him. "Not a big deal? You called me and the boys out for this?" His voice dropped lower, his tone dangerous. Rick swallowed hard. And in that moment, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. "Here, over a coffee spill?" Bear's voice was low but carried the weight of authority. His piercing stare cut through Rick like a knife. "You put us in the middle of your petty grudge? That's a big deal." Turning to the rest of the group, Bear raised his voice. "We don't stand for this kind of behavior, not toward anyone, and especially not toward someone who served our country." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. The air grew heavy with unspoken judgment as the bikers turned their cold gazes toward Rick. Bear motioned to one of his men. "Take his vest." Rick's face flushed with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I've been part of this group for years." "And now you're not," Bear said flatly. His tone was final. "Get out of here, before I make you regret it." Rick's jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides, but he knew better than to fight it. He yanked his vest off and threw it to the ground as another biker stepped forward, snatching it away. Seething, Rick turned on his heel and stormed toward his motorcycle. He shot one last venomous glare at Henry and Dwayne before revving his engine and tearing off down the road. Bear exhaled slowly, turning back to Henry, his hardened expression softening. "Mr. Parker," he said, his voice quieter now, "on behalf of our group, I want to apologize. Rick's actions don't represent who we are." Henry, still shaken but touched by the gesture, nodded. "Thank you," he said. "I appreciate that." Dwayne stepped forward, extending a hand to Bear. "Thanks for stepping up," he said. "Not everyone would have handled it the way you did." Bear shook Dwayne's hand firmly. "We look out for our own, and it looks like Mr. Parker here could use some extra support." Turning to the rest of the bikers, Bear gave a simple command. "Let's make sure he gets home safe." A chorus of murmured agreement followed. And just like that, Henry found himself at the center of an unlikely procession. The escort turns into a standoff. The group moved as one, a wall of protection around Henry as they guided him home. Dwayne walked beside them, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of Rick. As they turned onto a quieter path, a shortcut Henry often took to avoid attention, the low rumble of engines shattered the calm. The sound grew louder, more aggressive. Henry's hands tightened around the armrests of his wheelchair. He knew that sound. Dwayne's expression darkened. Bear's hand instinctively moved to his hip, where a heavy chain hung from his belt. Emerging from the bend ahead, Rick reappeared. His face twisted with fury. And he wasn't alone. 3 more bikers followed closely behind him, their motorcycles roaring as they came to a stop. Their stances made it clear they weren't here for a conversation. Rick dismounted, sneering. "Thought you could get rid of me that easy?" His voice was sharp, taunting. "I don't need your crew to handle this." Bear took a slow step forward, his voice low but firm. "Rick, walk away." Rick's laugh was sharp, grating. "You think I care what you or these clowns think? This is about respect, and I'm not leaving until I get mine." One of Rick's new companions, a wiry man with a snake tattoo winding up his neck, spoke up. "What's the old man got to do with this?" His tone was laced with confusion and mild amusement. "Thought we were here to settle things with your crew." Rick's finger shot out, pointing at Henry. "That old man is the reason I got kicked out. Him and that big shot actor over there." His eyes flicked to Dwayne, hatred barely concealed. "So yeah, he's part of this." Dwayne took a step forward. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "You've already crossed the line, Rick." A pause. "Don't make it worse." Rick's jaw twitched. He hesitated, but the presence of his new backup reignited his bravado. His hand dropped to the chain on his belt. "You think I'm scared of you just because you're famous?" Bear's voice boomed through the night. "That's enough." The weight of his command froze the air. He turned to the 3 newcomers, his expression unreadable but deadly serious. "You want to side with him? That's your choice. But you're not laying a hand on this man, or Mr. Parker." Silence. The standoff reached its breaking point. Dwayne shifted slightly, positioning himself between Henry and Rick. Behind him, Bear's bikers squared their shoulders, tension crackling in the air. Rick's hand twitched toward his chain. But before he could act, Bear moved. With one powerful step forward, his massive hand shot out. The final standoff. The chain clattered to the ground. The sound echoed through the silent dirt path like a gunshot. Rick cried out in pain as Bear twisted his wrist with just enough force to make him drop the weapon. His defiance flickered, momentarily replaced by fear. "You've lost," Bear growled, his voice as steady as thunder rolling in the distance. "Walk away, while you still can." Rick's 3 new recruits hesitated. Their loyalty to him was wavering fast, their gazes shifting between the sheer force of Bear's authority and the united front of the bikers standing against them. Snake Tattoo was the first to back down. He raised his hands, stepping away. "Hey, we didn't sign up for this," he muttered. A nudge to the others, and one by one, they turned, mounted their bikes, and sped off, leaving Rick to face the consequences alone. Rick was breathing heavily now, his pride bruised, but his stubbornness still burning. "This isn't over," he hissed, cradling his wrist. "You'll regret this." Bear didn't even flinch. "The only thing I regret," he said coolly, "is giving you a chance in the first place. Now, get out of here." Rick's face twisted in fury, but he knew when he was outmatched. He spat on the ground, his venomous glare sweeping over the group before he stomped toward his bike. With one last furious rev, his motorcycle roared to life. And just like that, he was gone. Brotherhood in the aftermath. The tension in the air began to dissipate, but Henry still felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Bear turned back to him, his hardened expression softening. "Mr. Parker, I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said, his voice quieter now. "Rick's been a problem for a while, but that's no excuse." Henry, his voice steady despite the lingering adrenaline, managed a small smile. "You handled it well," he said. Thank you. Dwayne clapped Bear on the shoulder. You did the right thing, he said. Not many would have stood up like that. Bear nodded, a hint of gratitude breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. It's the least we could do. He turned to Henry. Let's get you home, Mr. Parker. With the threat neutralized, the group resumed their journey. This time, their formation was even tighter around Henry. The dirt path soon gave way to familiar streets, and Henry's small house came into view. The sight of home brought a wave of relief, but also a strange sense of bittersweet gratitude. He had started this day alone. Now, he had more protection than he ever imagined. More than just bikers. Bear helped Henry out of the motorcycle sidecar and into his wheelchair, his movements careful, respectful, the kind of care that speaks louder than words. The bikers dismounted, their presence a stark contrast against the quiet suburban neighborhood. From behind curtains and over fences, neighbors peeked out, wide-eyed. They had probably never seen a gang of leather-clad bikers escorting a veteran home. But Henry wasn't afraid. These men were more than what the world saw. They were his protectors. Bear approached, blocking the late afternoon sun with his massive frame. Mr. Parker, he began, his voice gruff but sincere. Before we go, I just want to make sure you're all right. If that troublemaker ever shows up again, you call us. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small notepad, and scribbled something down. This is my number. Don't hesitate, day or night. Henry looked up, his weathered face breaking into a smile. That's mighty kind of you, Bear. I'll keep it handy, he said, tucking the paper into his jacket. Though I hope I won't have to use it. One by one, the other bikers followed suit. Each offering a scrap of paper with their own numbers, some scribbling down nicknames like Crusher and Whiskers. Their tough exteriors softened in the presence of the elderly veteran who had more fight in him than they'd seen in most men. Henry accepted each one with heartfelt gratitude. Bear turned to his crew, nodding. Let's help him get inside. Make sure he's settled. Two of the bikers unfolded Henry's wheelchair, carefully positioning it by his front steps. Bear and another member helped Henry transfer from the motorcycle sidecar back into his chair, their movements deliberate and gentle. It was a surprising display of care from men who otherwise carried an air of rugged intensity. As Henry rolled toward his front door, he paused, then turned back to face the men who had, in one day, become his guardians. Thank you. His voice was steady, but there was something deeper behind it. Something stronger than words. You've all gone above and beyond for an old man like me, Henry continued. I'll never forget this. Bear stepped forward, his expression softer than Henry had ever seen before. You're not just any old man, Mr. Parker, Bear said. You're a veteran. You've earned our respect. The other bikers murmured their agreement. A few offered nods. And at that moment, Henry wasn't just some elderly man in a wheelchair anymore. He was one of them. A final promise. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles, preparing to leave, Dwayne knelt beside Henry. If you ever need anything, he said, his voice low but full of promise, don't hesitate to ask. Henry nodded, his heart full. And as he watched his unlikely protectors ride off into the sunset, their engines fading into the distance, Henry knew one thing for certain. He had started this day alone. But he would never be alone again. A moment of reflection. The bikers murmured in quiet approval, a few of them exchanging nods. The weight of the moment settled over the group, not just relief, but respect. Dwayne, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward, his towering presence still commanding attention. He's right, Dwayne said, nodding toward Bear. What you've been through today. Most people would have folded. But you kept your head. That's real strength. Henry chuckled, shaking his head. I've had my share of battles, but this was something else. He paused, his gaze drifting toward the horizon, a faraway look in his eyes. My wife, Clara, always said I had a knack for finding trouble. A soft, nostalgic smile crossed his face. She'd be laughing her head off if she could see me now. The mention of Clara brought a moment of quiet reflection. Henry's fingers instinctively brushed against his wedding ring, now safely back where it belonged. He glanced at Dwayne, his gratitude clear. "Thank you," Henry said, his voice carrying more weight than just those two words. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Dwayne nodded, his expression warm. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Parker. It was the right thing to do. Just take care of yourself, all right?" Bear stepped forward, clapping a firm but careful hand on Henry's shoulder. "We should head out, but remember, you are not alone. You've got friends now. Call us anytime." Henry nodded, his heart full. A picture worth 1,000 words. The group began mounting their motorcycles, the low rumble of engines filling the quiet suburban street once more. But before they left, Dwayne pulled out his phone. "How about a picture?" he suggested, gesturing to the bikers. "Something to look back on and smile about." Henry laughed, a deep, genuine sound. "Why not? My doctor's never going to believe this anyway." The bikers gathered around Henry, their tough exteriors softened by smiles. Dwayne crouched beside Henry's wheelchair, his arm resting casually on the handle. Click. A moment of camaraderie, connection, captured forever. Dwayne checked the picture and showed it to Henry, grinning. But before they could admire it for long, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. "That's my manager," Dwayne said, grimacing slightly. "I've got to get back to set." Henry waved him off with a smile. "Go on, son. You've done more than enough." But Dwayne knelt beside him one last time, his voice soft. "You sure you're okay?" Henry's eyes met his, steady and certain. "I'll be fine. Thanks to you, and these fine gentlemen." Dwayne nodded, standing. His gaze lingered for just a second longer before he turned to leave. With a final rev of engines, the bikers roared down the street, disappearing into the distance. Henry sat there for a moment, listening as the sound of motorcycles faded into the evening air. An unforgettable day. As Henry wheeled himself toward his front door, he paused. He looked back at the now empty street. A faint smile played on his lips. "Well, darling," he murmured under his breath, imagining Clara shaking her head in amusement. "I've still got a bit of fight left in me." Inside, the familiar comfort of his home wrapped around him as he settled into his armchair. The events of the day played in his mind, a mix of fear, gratitude, and an unexpected sense of adventure. Then, his phone buzzed again. A message. Dwayne had sent him the picture. Henry opened it, staring at the screen. There he was, surrounded by a crew of bikers and a Hollywood star. A reminder that even the most ordinary days could take extraordinary turns. He exhaled, the hum of distant motorcycles still echoing faintly in his ears. Despite the aches in his body, despite the challenges ahead, he felt something new. A renewed sense of purpose. A reminder that the world, unpredictable and sometimes harsh, still had kindness in it. And today, he had been surrounded by it. A message to the viewers. What a day for Henry Parker. A day filled with unexpected danger, incredible courage, and newfound friendships. Stories like his remind us of the power of kindness and standing up for what's right. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. We'll see you in the next one. The end. This version elevates the emotional depth, makes it feel cinematic, and keeps the audience hooked till the very last word. Perfect for YouTube storytelling. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks.